So we're going to start this new design pillar with human glossary. There are going to be a lot of words, but it's going to be relatively easy, I think. And let's get started. So human glossary, the first one is monetary policy, obviously, because what is monetary policy? Monetary policy is basically how money is governed and managed. In most countries in the world, you have the central bank that does that. The central bank will manage how money is being governed, is being used. We talk about the supply of money, how do you increase more supply of money, how do you affect money. So if you relate that to tokens, it's token policy, it's just how tokens are being used, how tokens are managed, how tokens are governed. This can be governance in terms of automation, like smart contracts, like with code or with any formula, or it can be governed in other forms, in other ways, like human participation and how that will affect the supply of tokens. So token policy is how tokens are being governed and managed. Property rights. Property rights is this socially constructed contracts where it gives you the rights to use or own property. And in the real world, we talk about property rights like land or house or your mortgage, your house, more physical resources. And we can even talk about intellectual property and the rights to use the intellectual property. In the digital world, we can look at, we're looking at stuff like digital art, digital versions of assets. We can also look at digitizing intellectual properties and the rights to that. So there are a lot of things to play with property rights, and it's very easy to just translate physical properties to the digital format. We can just create like securitized tokens or non-fungible tokens that is linked to the asset with property rights embedded in it. But basically, it's just rights that gives you, it's just this thing that gives you rights to use and own the property. Digital currency. Digital currency is a type of currency that exists electronically. So you have two types of digital currencies. You've got legal tender and not legal tender. Legal tender is basically money that is issued by the central bank. And that's how you just define it as being legal tender. The other one is not legal tender. We have, in not legal tender, you have two types again. You have, one is privately issued cryptocurrency, and the other one is virtual currencies, so everything else. Privately issued cryptocurrencies, it's where it's privately issued and the underlying technology is blockchain and DLT. For other virtual currencies, the underlying technology is just the internet. As long as you use the internet, you can issue a digital currency. That's a virtual currency that's part of digital currency. Interest rates. Interest rates is the kind of the amount of rent accrued when you borrow an asset or you lend an asset. So, for instance, if I want to borrow £1,000 from the bank, then I go to the bank and I borrow that money. Well, the thing is, we can't borrow money for free, right? We can't borrow money. We can't borrow £1,000 and then at the end of 3 months I return £1,000. It doesn't work like that. You have to pay rent to borrow the money. So this rent is called interest rates. So it's additional money that you have to pay to the bank for lending you money. It also works the other way around. So if the bank wants to use my money, so let's say when I have a fixed deposit with the bank, and then the bank will give me some interest rates to reward me for putting the money in the bank, and the bank can use my money to do their other investments. And that returns by putting money in the bank, it's called interest rates. So there are also a lot of different types of interest rates. Interest rates are just basically it's like rent on money or rent on an asset. Exchange rates. Exchange rates are the rates where are the conversion rates. So when I want to change $1 to 1 British pounds, what's the conversion like? How do I convert them? So the conversion is exchange rates. Exchange rates we also have exchange rates. We usually use exchange rates in currencies. And in the crypto world, we have exchanges where you can exchange different types of cryptocurrencies by trading them. And then using the market demand and supply, you can define the exchange rates. of some currencies. There are many ways to define exchange rates. We'll go into that a little bit later. Required reserves. So when a bank has money, right? And then you can go to the bank and you go to the ATM, you put your card in and you withdraw some cash out. So the bank needs to have cash in their ATMs and in their bank vaults, so that when people want to borrow physical cash, they can give it to you. So that's part of required reserves. And this required reserve is mandated by the central bank. So there are two types of bank. You've got central bank and commercial bank. Central bank is the big boss bank, and he controls how money is being managed in the entire country. And then the commercial banks will be banks like the Citibank, Bank of America, you've got HSBC, OCBC, UOB, all these banks. And they deal with people like you and me. We open bank accounts, they have to do some trade, they have to do some financial advice. So that's commercial banks. And for commercial banks to have money to operate, they go to the central bank, the big boss bank, and say, hi, big boss bank, I would like to borrow some amount of money so that I can run my operations. Big boss bank will say, okay, this is some money, and I want you to put 10% of the money that you borrow from me to put it in the bank. Then the 90% you can run your operations. So that's also because one of the reasons is because there's a risk of run of bank. So if, let's say, the country is doing very badly, everyone suddenly goes to the bank and wants to withdraw all the money out. The bank needs to have physical cash, and that's why you've got required reserves in the bank vault, physical cash, just in case people want to withdraw money. That's just one of the reasons. So that's required reserves. We're going to talk a little bit about that later. We're going to talk about that in a slightly different way. Savings function. Savings function is how savings is related to income. So usually when income increases, savings also increases, but sometimes when income increases, people also spend more and the savings are the same amount. So savings function is basically how much people save. And in the crypto world, we can also look at that as in how much, when by savings, we are talking about people holding on to the tokens because they're saving the tokens for something else, or for saving it for the price to rise and then selling it after. So we want to look at this area of savings. Price stability. Price stability is that prices are stable, prices are consistent, price level is consistent over a period of time or over time. So when we talk about price stability of a currency's price is stable across a period of time. Then again, when we think of stability, the thing about stability is people like to just assume stability means things don't change, things don't move. But stability is really a comparison to something. So we can say that the price is stable compared to US dollars because this currency moves together with US dollars. Or price stability can be the price is stable relative to a bar of chocolate. So the bar of chocolate will be like your anchor price, and then you always want to maintain stability to the price of chocolate. So price stability is relative. The stability part is relative to something. We have effective lower bound. It used to be called zero lower bound because it's basically the interest rates, the lowest interest rate a central bank can go to stimulate the economy. And if it used to be zero lower bound because the lowest interest rates available is just 0%, where there's no interest rates, you can just keep borrowing money freely. But now we are looking at the flip in yield curve, we're looking at negative interest rates, so maybe zero lower bound is not relevant anymore, and we are naming it effective lower bound. It's basically the lowest interest rate a central bank can go, or in the monetary policy area, the lowest interest rates to stimulate an economy. Inflation. Inflation is where I don't have cash now, but the same note has a reduced valuation. So that means if I used to buy one bar of chocolate for £1, and tomorrow, because there's inflation now, and tomorrow the chocolate now costs £1.50. So that means that I'm buying the exact same chocolate, but I'm actually using more money now because the value of my money has decreased. And that's called inflation. Or now I have to use more money to buy the same goods. So that's inflation. QE is quantitative easing. It's one of the tools in monetary policy where the government will be printing more money and to stimulate the economy, to make it seem like, oh, the economy is doing well because there's more money in the market, and then helps to encourage people to spend more. So quantitative, because can you just imagine? I have the same cup of water. I have a bottle of water, and I've got 5 cups. And if I pour the water into all the 5 cups, all the 5 cups are filled. Now, if I add another 5 cups and I have the same amount of water, when I pour water into the cups, now the cups are only half filled. So in the same way, there's amount of money in the country, and then you have an amount of notes available. So all the notes will be divided by the amount of value of money that the country has. Now, if we increase more notes available, because by printing more money, then each money has a lower valuation, and that's where inflation happens. So quantitative easing is just printing more money. The Bank of Japan has been doing that for quite a bit, and US was also doing that in during the 2008 crisis. Government bonds. Government bonds is this contract that the government creates where they borrow money from you and they promise to return it to you over a specific period, and sometimes including interest rates. So a person can, it's usually very safe because a government doesn't default on the bond. If a government defaults on a bond, meaning the government doesn't have money to pay you back, then that's a very, very serious problem. So usually government bonds are quite safe. And in government, so when the government wants to borrow money from people because of whatever fiscal policy that they're doing, then they issue bonds and they sell bonds, and then people can just buy people can buy government bonds and give money to the government, and then in 10 years time they can get the money back. Hence government bonds. Discount rate. So remember when we talk about required reserves, I said the commercial bank will go to the central bank, the big boss bank, and say, "Guy, excuse me, can I borrow some money from you?" Then of course the central bank will say, "Yeah, sure, just borrow money from me." But what's the benefit of that? Why would the central bank say that? Obviously, because the central bank can earn interest rates, and this interest rate is called a discount rate. So discount rate is the interest rate given from the central bank to the commercial bank. Of course, the interest rate is much lower than the money you borrow directly from the bank, because the difference is where the commercial bank makes money. But basically, when the commercial bank goes to the big boss bank, central bank, and borrow money from them so that they can do their operations, they have to pay an interest rate. It's called discount rate. I talked about fiscal policy just now. Fiscal policy is basically the government spending money to stimulate the economy, or to increase the government's income through taxes. So these are 2 tools that government can use, either government spending or taxation. You can increase or decrease taxation, or increase or decrease government spending. And these are all part of expanding these are all part of these tools to help the economy to either expand or contract. So if, let's say, like right now we're experiencing a recession, or we're going to experience recession. It's been many years now that we are going to experience recession. We're not really there yet. But one way to recession is where the economy is shrinking. And one way to stop that is to make sure that the economy is going the other way, is to expand. How can government do that? Government can reduce taxation so people have more money to be spending. Government can increase government spending, like building new roads, building new highways, building new infrastructure, and this will help to provide more employment. This will also stimulate the economy, so there is a multiplier effect. But then the government can do both at the same time. You can't reduce taxation, which is reducing income, and increase spending at the same time. Then government has no money. So this is where the government needs to balance. How do you deal with both of them? Market maker. Market maker is an institute or an institution that will buy and sell financial products that's available on the exchange, or just that's available in the market. So we're going to talk a little bit. So in the physical world, you have a lot of big hedge funds or big financial institutions. They are market makers. So they, as long as people want to buy or sell products, they will just sell or buy it, and then they will make the difference in spread. But that's quite a complicated thing anyway. In the next lesson, we're going to look at how can we create an automatic market maker that doesn't earn money, so that we can always give the additional value add back to the economy or ecosystem. So we're going to look at market maker in the next lesson. Liquidity. So market maker and liquidity is quite closely related. Liquidity is just how easy you can change this asset into cash. So obviously when your asset is already cash, that's the most liquid because it's already cash. It's very easy to change to cash. If you have a £5 note, a fiver, you go to Tesco and you say, can I exchange it for coins? You can do it. It's very easy. Whereas if you have like a book and you want to change it for a fiver, it's very difficult. You got to sell it. You got to find someone to want to buy it. It's not so liquid. Market maker exists to help the financial market be more liquid, because anytime you want to buy or sell, they will be there to be selling or buying your items. So to make sure it's more liquid. So liquidity is something that we'll be also talking about. And lastly, fungible tokens. So fungible tokens are tokens that can be replaced easily. For things that can be replaced easily will be like cash. So I've got, or like money in general. I've got 1 Bitcoin and I can just exchange the Bitcoin with you, so that we both have 1 Bitcoin. We are just changing the Bitcoin itself with each other. And at the end, we still have the same 1 Bitcoin. Although it's not exactly the identical Bitcoin, as in, the same hashes, the same transaction history and everything, the valuation is the same. And it doesn't matter. If we both have 1 Bitcoin, I can use that to go and buy something. So that's fungible. Non-fungible will be stuff that it's a bit more difficult to replace. And that would be stuff like CryptoKitties, when the kitty itself is unique on its own. It has a very unique identity. Then that's non-fungible. It can also be stuff like if you tokenize a property that's not non-fungible. It's also non-fungible tokens can also be linked to property rights, and that'd be something very interesting that we will talk about next lesson as well. So these are the 18 general key terms that I want to share. We'll be talking a lot about more interesting terms as this lesson and the next lessons are going to go, and I'll just explain the rest along the way. If you don't know anything, just drop them in the comments and I will reply to them.